Good morning, Liberty students. We're continuing the era of the Judges, but we actually switched to a new book of the Bible today. We're going to the next book after Judges, which is Ruth. And now Ruth's story takes place during the time of the Judges, and it's this one bright spot in the midst of these centuries of disobedience and rebellion and judgment from the Lord. And so Ruth, I encourage you this morning, even though the lesson leaders only gives you some snippets, you've got time. It's only 4 chapters long. I encourage you to read all 4 chapters as a group, maybe popcorn read around the group, and then dive into the discussion and to the questions. But it's a great story. It's this very zoomed-in story of one family and what God does through this one woman, her mother-in-law, and then through another family, Boaz's family. And I won't give away too much of the story, but there's some great things. There's so many things to pull away from this story. One of them is this is a great look, and again, at a real family going through real tragedy, that God is working even through and even in tragedy. That God is up to something and He is doing something, and that even when we have to wait to see why and what's going to happen next, God is always working out His plan for our good and His glory. And that doesn't make the tragedy any easier, but it gives us hope in the midst of hard things that God is doing something. And it also, there's several points in the story, from the tragedy at the beginning to some of Naomi's odd instructions that are their cultural instructions that are odd to Ruth. But these moments of just trusting and obeying. If we'll just trust and obey what God is saying, or what the godly people God has put in our life are telling us to do, if we'll just trust and obey, we'll see God's blessing and result. There's other little elements of the story that I think, students, you'll connect with. Many of you have moved here from other places, or you're about to move to another place. In this story, Ruth, both Naomi and Ruth, leave their home and go to a new country and to a new place, or they come back home after being gone. And so that idea of leaving everything and everyone you know and going somewhere new, is God going to take care of me here? Is God going to work in my life here? Is God going to help us here? But one of the big picture things I really love about this story, and the lesson points this out, is that the gospel, we hear the word gospel all the time, the good news of Jesus, that the gospel is both an event, the person of Jesus coming, and He lived, died, rose again. That's the core of the gospel, this event that happened. But also the story of the gospel is from the beginning of the Bible to the end. And in this story, you see God writing this part of the gospel story, getting us to Jesus centuries later. Because what happens in this story is a child is born to Ruth at the end. And this child becomes the grandfather of King David, who is in the lineage of Jesus. And so Ruth goes from being an outsider, someone who doesn't belong with the people of Israel. She's from another country. She's from an idolatrous country and immoral people. And she comes to the people of Israel and essentially becomes an Israelite. And God brings her into His people, and she becomes an ancestor of Jesus Himself. And what's really cool is that Ruth could never have known this. When she married Naomi's son, when her husband died, when she moved back to Bethlehem, she never could have known that one day in that same town, centuries later, God would send His own son through her lineage to save the world. And so it's a reminder for you, student one, that no matter how on the outside you think you are, maybe even feel like when you come to church, I don't really belong with these Christian people. I know Jesus, but I don't feel like I belong with these other church people. It's a reminder that God isn't looking for people who fit a certain mold. He's looking for people to bring into His family through His Son Jesus, and wants to work in your life. And it's also a reminder of, you may not really understand what God's doing in your life right now. You hear all the time, God has a purpose and a plan for your life. And in middle school and high school, you may be like, how do I even know what that is? Just keep trusting and obeying. Keep waiting on the Lord. And just like Ruth, you have no idea what God has planned for your life. But He promises that He does have good things planned for us. The story wraps up talking about redeemers, and I'll let the leaders get into that more with you, but also it's just a reminder that we have a Redeemer who has come for us. That's Jesus, and He wants us to go bring others to Him so they can be redeemed as well. So get into the story of Ruth. I hope it's a fantastic study this morning, and we will see you on Wednesday night.